Okay, so welcome to Mobileye. Mobileye is what I call the poster child of the startup nation. And the first question I want you guys to think about is, why is Israel known as the startup nation? How is it that we are this powerhouse of innovation? How is it that we have the most startups, the most IPOs, the most patents in the world? Of course, that's all per capita, but even in absolute terms, we are just behind the United States and China. That doesn't make a lot of sense for a country that's got the population the size of New York City. So everybody's asking this question: how is Israel this powerhouse of innovation? So much so that they wrote a book about us. It's called The Startup Nation. So this book basically goes through chapter by chapter and tries to answer this question. How is Israel this powerhouse of innovation? There's a chapter on the Israeli army. Guys go to the army at a young age and they learn self-discipline, they learn self-sacrifice, they learn all kinds of skills, and they take that with them to the working world. There's a chapter on Israeli society. There's no hierarchy on Israeli society, so low-level engineers can talk to high-level management, and you'll hear about that in the Mobileye story. But the fact of the matter is that there's one sentence in the middle of this book that says it all. I'll read it for you now. It says, with all of its problems, Israel has one commanding advantage: a sense of purpose. So I want you to put that idea in the back of your mind while I try to go through this talk. Let me introduce myself. My name is Mois Navon. I'm one of the founding engineers of Mobileye. I designed this chip. This is the chip that's powering the autonomous vehicle revolution. This is the chip that Intel bought for $15.3 billion. That's the largest exit in Israeli history. That's the second largest purchase that Intel ever made in its history. And the question that you need to ask yourself now is, why? Why would the largest chip manufacturer in the world, they know how to make chips. Intel makes thousands of chips in thousands of industries. Why would they come to Israel, to a little pipsqueak company that makes one chip? That's all we do. And pay this kind of money? So now, 15.3 billion is a big number, right? But I mean, is that expensive? Is that cheap? I mean, how do you value a company? If you're selling 15.3 billion tables for $1 each, that's a lot of tables. That's not a lot of money. So the question is, what does this number really represent? So the finance guys use all kinds of numbers to evaluate a company. But there's really one very simple number to just get an idea. If you pull up this is a stock chart from Google Finance, Yahoo Finance, it doesn't matter. If you go online and try to figure out, how's this company doing? So you get a chart like this. It has all kinds of numbers. All the numbers have to do with the price. There's only one number that has to do with the value. That's the price per earnings, the PE. So the price per earnings is how much does it cost, divided by how much is the company making. So it gives you a kind of a rough idea how much is it worth. So like a PE of 1 means that it costs as much as they're making, which would sound kind of logical, but that's not how the business world works. So if you take the 500 largest companies on the New York Stock Exchange, known as the S&P 500, okay? If you look at the average PE, how much are people paying more than their earnings? You will see that the average PE is about 16. So that means that people are generally willing to pay 16 times more than a company is making. Why would you do that? Because people know that, like if we take Coca-Cola, for example. So, more people are going to be born next year, so more babies are going to drink Coke, and so the earnings are going to go up, and the stock will be made more valuable, and that's how people make money on the stock market in general. Now, if you're a tech company, so people expect a lot more from you than babies drinking Coke. They expect that you are going to be designing something that's going to change the future. They're expecting exponential growth in the near future. So they're willing to pay much more than 16 times your current earnings. They may pay 30 times, 50 times, 60. When you start getting into those numbers, so now you start playing with risk. Because what you're saying is, I believe this company is going to be worth 60 times more in the very near future. Otherwise, like, why am I investing in this? So the question is, we know the P, it's 15.3 billion. We don't know the earnings. But how much do you think Intel paid more than we were making? 16 times? 50 times? 100 times? Intel paid 130 times our current earnings. So that's a pretty significant premium. But then, you may say, okay, well, you don't bother us with the PEs. Everybody knows there's another metric that finance guys use. It's called future cash flows. They know that there's going to be a lot of money coming in from all kinds of contracts, and so it's going to be worth much more. That's true, and that's not what I'm asking you. What I'm asking you is, why didn't Intel do it itself? Intel knew that there's going to be a huge business in the automotive industry, specifically in autonomous vehicles. Why don't they just make this chip? Why did they come here? This is a rhetorical question, actually. I'm not waiting for answers, okay? All right, so anyway, what I'm trying to say is, I'm trying to get you guys to sort of think about the issue here. What is the issue? The issue is, A, why would Intel come to pay so much money? B, why would so many companies from all kinds of countries come to invest in Israel in the way they are that's made us into the startup nation? That's what I want to try to answer for you now. And to answer that question, I want to put it into a little context. And the context is, I want to explain to you, how did I get here? And that will explain to you, how did Mobileye get here? And then I'll explain to you, how did the startup nation get here? Because if you listen to my story, so my story is the Mobileye story. It's the story of the startup nation. So as you can tell from my accent, I wasn't exactly born in Israel. I grew up in Los Angeles. Basically what's known as a secular Jew, not religious, kind of culturally connected Jew. I had a great life. This is me surfing and skateboarding in the 1980s. Really, everything was great, except that when I was about 7 or 8 years old, I found out that people die. And so I said, so what's the point? What is the purpose of our being here if we're just going to check out? Now, as I began to think about this, it didn't take me long growing up in Los Angeles to get onto the Greek and Roman answer, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. But then I thought about this question a little bit more. And I said, when you're gone, you are so gone that you don't even know you ever existed. So what's the point of eat, drink, and be merry? So my parents weren't existentialist philosophers. They weren't particularly religious. So I went surfing. I surfed my whole youth until I got to college. I was on the surf team at UCLA. And it was in my second year at UCLA, I was studying computer engineering, that I got a student internship at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. So you can imagine, for an engineering student, an internship at JPL is a really big deal. I remember the first day I got there, I was really excited. I met the boss. He explained to me all the engineering. He gave me a tour of the campus. It's about half the size of Jerusalem. So that took us to lunchtime. So we went to the cafeteria, and he said, order whatever you want. So I smelled the hamburgers on the grill. I said, I have a cheeseburger. So he looked at me, and he made a face. I said, the cheeseburgers here aren't any good? Made another face. I said, listen, I don't read faces, so if you don't tell me the cheeseburgers aren't good here, I'm going to get what I like. I think that was the last cheeseburger I ever ate. See, it turns out that this boss of mine at JPL was a religious Jew, And for those of you who don't know, in Judaism, eating milk and meat is a big no-no. So basically, for the next 2 years of this student internship, half the day we talked engineering, and half the day we talked Jewish philosophy. In a nutshell, basically what he said was, look, we believe there's a creator. We believe you have a soul. We believe there's a purpose. You're here to fix yourself. You're here to fix the world. So these ideas began to resonate with me. I started trying to think, I need to do more purposeful things. I need to do things that really, mean something. The problem was that at the time, I was the Rush chairman of a fraternity at UCLA. This is me in the circle. You guys know about fraternities? Yeah, they're like the movies. So basically, you have parties. The Rush chairman throws the parties at the beginning of the year. There are other chairmen that throw parties in the middle of the year. I remember we threw this one big party, and we had all these pizzas, and I had this pepperoni pizza on my hand. And I said, oh, my boss at JPL said no milk and meat. So I took the pepperonis off. For those of you who know anything about Jewish law, halacha, this doesn't help at all. You can't cook the stuff together. But it was a good start. Sort of to cut to the chase, while I worked at Mobileye as an engineer for 16 years, so 6 of those years, I went to a yeshiva just about 10 minutes from here called Merkaz Harav. And so 6 years, 2 nights a week, I learned to be a rabbi. So I'm an engineer, and I'm also a rabbi. But to go back to the story, so at the time, I was at UCLA. I was going out with this girl who later became my wife. The two of us sort of like grew into our Judaism together, slowly tried to do more mitzvot and stuff. And then we said, if we really want to do this Jewish thing, we need to go to the land of the Jews. We need to go to Israel. So I began to send my resume to all kinds of American engineering companies that had operations in Israel. I was lucky to get a no thank you letter. Nobody's hiring anybody from 7,000 miles away. So then my wife said, let's just go. And I said, you mean without a job? And she said, yeah, people, they do that. I said, I don't know those people. So right around that time, I was working for an engineering company that had a few Israelis that were on leave. They took like a 1-year sabbatical leave to go get some experience, some money, see something new. So they were working at this company, and I had made friends with them. And one of them comes into my office one morning, and he puts this fax on my desk. It's a sheet from IBM Israel. IBM Israel is coming to LA to interview for these 9-10 positions. So I said, wow, that's great, but how'd you know I was looking for a job? And he said, I don't, but I just thought you would be interested. I said, yeah, I'm interested. So I faxed my resume back to IBM Israel. They made an appointment. I met the CEO of IBM Israel, Yosef Raviv. Yosef Raviv was really one of the founders of the Startup Nation. He brought IBM to the Technion campus in Haifa in the 1970s. That's before anybody used the word start or up in the same sentence. So anyway, I met him in the Beverly Hills Hilton, in the lobby. He gave me an interview. He said, look, you seem like a nice guy. Your resume looks good, but you need a technical interview. I can't give you a technical interview. But the head of the chip design group is going to be in the San Francisco airport next week. Can you meet him there? So I said, cheaper to fly to San Francisco than to fly to Israel. So the next week, I met a guy named Aaron in the VIP lounge of the San Francisco airport. So Aaron is another big name in the Startup Nation. He was the head of the Israel Innovation Authority. He was the first CEO of Apple Israel. At the time, he was the head of the chip design group at IBM. So I met him, and sounds really cool, VIP lounge, big shot engineer. Not cool. You see, because he was also the head of the computer science department at the Technion. And his idea of interview questions is asking you finals questions. End of the year test questions is what he's asking me. While I'm sitting in this VIP lounge, people are drinking beers, playing music, watching Monday Night Football. To make a long story short, I failed. He tried to give me some hints. I tried to answer. At the end, he said, "Thank you very much." I folded up my stuff and I left. When I got to the back door of this VIP lounge, I said, "Oh my God, you just blew your chance to get to Israel. I can't let this happen." So I turned around, I went back to Aaron. He's still sitting on the couch in this VIP lounge, and I said, "Listen, you know what I don't know, but you don't know what I do know. I've been working in this industry for 10 years. I've been designing all kinds of interesting things. I designed the Star Wars system. You guys know Star Wars? Not the movie." So in the 1990s, Ronald Reagan, the President of the United States, was very concerned that Russia was going to shoot intercontinental ballistic missiles at America. So he developed what's called the Strategic Defense Initiative, otherwise known as Star Wars. We built missiles to take out Russian missiles in space. Now, I was tasked with designing the system to make sure that that works. Like, how do you make sure that a missile is going to take out another missile in space? So one way to do that is to shoot up two missiles in space and see if they hit. But what if they don't? Not pretty. So you have to design a simulator. So I designed what's called the IRSP, the Infrared Scene Projector. It's a fancy name that basically means we made a movie player that plays Russian missiles going by. You take the camera that's going to go on the front of the American missile, and you put it in front of the movie player, and you see how it follows. Sounds pretty simple. Movie player, we know how to make movie players, but not exactly a movie player, because you see, these are heat-seeking missiles. So you have to play the movie in heat, which means you have to take laser beams and line them up. It's a room about this size, full of laser beams and all kinds of stuff. Anyway, I explained to him the system. He said, "Thank you very much." I folded up my stuff and I left. About a week or so later, I got a call from Yosef Raviv, the CEO of IBM Israel. He said, "We want to give you a job." So I went to my wife and I said, "I have good news and I have bad news." So the good news is we got the job. The bad news is they want to pay us half of what we're making. So my wife said, "Fine." And I said, "What do you mean, fine? We're not exactly rich in LA. How do you think we're going to make it on half of our salary?" So she said, "They're making it, we'll make it." Not so easy. Did you ever have to cut your salary in half? So if you Google tips on budgeting, the first thing that comes up is stop drinking coffee out. Thank you very much. We're way past coffee out. I had a car of my own since I was 16 years old. If you don't have a car in LA, you don't exist in LA. But now, remember we said Israel is not a big country, no hierarchy. So who stops to pick me up on my first day to work? Yosef Raviv, the CEO of IBM Israel, stops in his Rolls Royce. Okay, in 1992, there were no Rolls Royces in Israel. It was a Volvo. But a Volvo in 92 was like a Rolls Royce in LA. Anyway, it was a good start. Haifa is really a very nice place. IBM is really an amazing place to start. It's one of 3 R&D facilities in all the world that IBM has outside of the United States, at least at the time. So I got a lot of experience there. I really learned how to design chips there. But socially, it was a nightmare. No English speakers, no religious people. Things have changed now, but at that time it was very hard. So I said, "I can't take it. I'm out of here. I got to do something. Either I'm going back to LA or I'm going somewhere else." At the time, a friend of mine had a startup in Jerusalem. I said, "Oh, Jerusalem, English speakers, religious people, I'll go there." So we went to move to Jerusalem. Before I left, they had a little party for me at IBM, and they said, "So what is this startup you're going to do? What do they do?" And I told them, and they said, "You're leaving IBM Israel for that? That's a really dumb idea." And they were right, The startup closed in like 3 months, and I was on the street. But at least I was on the street in Jerusalem. So I began to look for work. After a couple of weeks, I found a job in Herzliya Pituach. Herzliya Pituach is the R&D facility, or center, I should say, just north of Tel Aviv. I went to go work for a company called OptiBase. They were making MPEG systems. You guys know about MPEG? You do. You see, if you watch movies on your phones, so you know about MPEG. MPEG is the protocol that compresses and decompresses video. If you didn't have MPEG on your phone, you would need a room this size to carry around all your videos. So at the time, I'm talking about 1994, MPEG was just beginning in the very, very beginning stages. I was tasked with designing the first video-on-demand system for airplanes. If you guys watched videos on your airplane when you flew here, so you watched on my system. In 1994, if you wanted to watch video on an airplane, so you waited for the stewardess to put a cassette in the machine, and you watched what she wanted, when she wanted, and if there was turbulence, so you didn't watch. So anyway, this was a great opportunity for me. I really learned a lot. I designed a lot of interesting things there, but driving from Jerusalem to Herzliya Pituach is a nightmare. Basically, my life was drive, eat, sleep, drive, eat, sleep, work, drive, eat, sleep, work. I couldn't take it. After about 1.5 years, I said, I have to find something else. I can't do this anymore. A friend of mine had a job for me at a place called NDS, News Digital Systems. It was later bought out by Cisco. They're basically the technology end of the news corporation. Rupert Murdoch has lots of companies, B-Sky B, Fox TV, and so you need to make sure that people pay for the TV they're watching. So I designed a chip that scrambles the video, and then when it's sent out over the head end, it comes to your house. If you have my chip in your television, then it descrambles it. You watch TV. You don't have it, you don't. Now, just before I left the MPEG company, OptiBase, so a friend of mine said, did you buy your options? So I don't know, you guys know about how engineering companies work. Basically, they give you a salary, and when the company's a private company, didn't go public yet, so they give you options. Options are what will become shares or stock in the company when they go public. So you have these options, you have a piece of the company. But the company's not your friend, they're your employer. So they give them to you while you work there, but if you leave, so now you have to pay for them, and then you can take them, or you have to leave them there. So I told my friend, I don't have money to buy these options. So he looked at me and he said, are you crazy? We're engineers. Engineers are never going to make it financially on their salary. It's the options. You don't leave options on the table. So I said, it sounds like good advice, but you know, I can't take this drive anymore, and I don't have the money, so I'm out of here. I put this little piece of information in the back of my head. I went to work for NDS from 1995 to the year 2000. In the year 2000, I don't know if you guys remember, but that was basically the internet era. That was what is known as the dot-com boom. This is a stock chart of the NASDAQ market, basically where all the heavy tech companies are. In 1980 to 1990, 98, 99, all of a sudden, 1999, the stock market took off. This is basically the whole world finding out that the next big thing is the internet. And so this little piece of information did not go over the heads of all the entrepreneurs in Israel, and basically everybody was trying to come up with some internet company, some internet device, some way to cash in on this huge revolution. And so basically every little office space that you can see here was filled with another company, and that's when I said, now is my chance to put my friend's piece of advice to work. I'm going to go work for a startup. I'm going to go get some options. So I went to go work for a company called OnePath. They were making fiber to the home. Fiber to the home, many of you hopefully know about already. Basically, it brings you internet, telephone, television at the speed of light. In the year 2000, this was all very, very new. That wasn't around, and we were going to develop some new systems to make that available to homes around the world. So They hired me to design this networking chip. They gave me my salary. They gave me my options. And they said, don't worry, we have funding for 1 year. But next year, we're going to go to the NASDAQ, we'll go public, we'll get money, and we'll keep developing. But if you guys know the history of the dot-com boom, there was no next year. You see, the dot-com boom became the dot-com bust. And, if we had talked about PEs in the 16s, 30s, 50s, hundreds, these are PEs in the thousands. And so, all of a sudden, the guys at Wall Street said, 2 guys in a garage writing a website have a PE of 1,000? That doesn't make sense. And they sold, and the whole world sold, and within a year or less, the stock market was cut in half. So now, this is all very nice and interesting to talk about for finance, econ, right? This is not nice to live through. You see, when this happens, economies crash, companies close, people lose their jobs. And that's what happened to my company. They went under, and I was on the street again. But now, this wasn't just being on the street. This is the bottom of my career. You see, because not only am I on the street, all my engineering friends are on the street, and all the engineering companies that we would have gone to work for are gone. The big companies are streamlining, the little companies have gone bankrupt, and so now what do? So that's when I had to put into play a little piece of Jewish philosophy. So this is a page of the Talmud. It's a Gemara in Brachot. It talks about a rabbi by the name of Rebbe Akiva. So Rebbe Akiva was a very famous rabbi. He's actually one of the greatest teachers of Israel. He didn't have a particularly easy life, but he had a little piece of philosophy that was called Gam Zu L'Tova. This is also for the best. Anytime anything bad happened to him, he said, Gam Zu L'Tova, this is also for the best. Now, Rebbe Akiva was not a prophet. He didn't know that's going to be good for him. He's just like us, but he had the ability to live by this piece of philosophy. Now, Gam Zu L'Tova doesn't mean everything is going to be good. What Gam Zu L'Tova means is that I'm a little piece of the puzzle. And there are much bigger things than me going on. And I don't see everything, I don't understand everything, but I know that there's a plan and a purpose, and I'm not going to get stuck. Gam Zu L'Tova is about picking up the pieces and moving on. It's about not getting stuck. So now, this is great to talk about for philosophy, but this is very hard to put into practice. So you need to teach yourself with little things. You're at the beach and you're walking and you stub your toe. Ouch, ouch, Gam Zu L'Tova. Then you keep going. If you get really good at that, so then when you leave school or work and you get to your car and you have this $200 parking ticket on your windshield and you look at it and you say, Gam Zu L'Tova. And you get in your car and you move on. If you get really good at that, so when you're out of work and all your friends are out of work and you have 5 kids, a wife, and a mortgage to take care of, you send out your resume. So that's what I did. I start looking. It took a while. After a couple weeks, I had an offer from a big company in Tel Aviv, but I said, no big companies. I didn't give up on my dream. I want to work for a small startup. So I kept looking, kept talking to people. After another couple of weeks, I had an offer from a startup. But they were designing internet chips. And I said, no, I already learned my lesson, no internet for me. So I kept looking, kept talking to people, and then a friend of mine said, you used to work with a guy at NDS. He's working for a startup in a house in Ramot. Ramot is this neighborhood just outside of Jerusalem. So I said, oh, a startup, I'm looking for a startup, but what do they do? Internet? And he said, no. Something in automotive. I said, cars. People need cars. I'll go work for them. So in case you didn't guess, that little car startup was bought by Intel for the biggest exit in Israeli history. So Gam Zu L'Tova. And that brings us to the Mobileye story. So Mobileye was started about a year or so before I got here by a professor by the name of Amnon Shashua. Amnon Shashua at the time was the head of the computer science department at the Hebrew University, and he was doing what professors do. research, papers, lectures. He happened to be in the Far East giving a lecture on his latest research, and in the lecture, so he said, we can detect objects with a single camera. So somebody in the back of the room raised their hand and said, excuse me, do you mean 3D objects in 3D space with a single camera? And Amnon said, yeah. And he moved on with his lecture. When he came off the stage, he was surrounded by a team of engineers from Toyota. And they said, are you kidding? We've been working on this problem for years. And we've been working under the premise, 2 eyes, 2 cameras. You can't see depth without 2 eyes. If you cover 1 eye, everything goes flat. But not really. So, do you need 2 eyes or you don't need 2 eyes? So I began to understand this when I was at the Boston Science Museum several years ago. They had a display, a big glass box like an aquarium without fish. Inside this box are all kinds of things a cup, a yo-yo, a pencil, everyday stuff. And you're like, why is this in the museum? So you come around to the side of this box and there's a black glass plate with a little peephole like you have on your door, and you look through the hole and you see those objects flat like a poster. What happened? So the answer is context. Okay, when I look at you, I know what people look like. I know what chairs look like. I know what rooms look like. And so even though I don't see the depth, my brain interpolates between what I know and what I don't know. And I can guess. And I can guess that you're like, 6 feet from me and you're like 8 feet from me. And basically, for anything more than arm's length, I can guess. For less than arm's length, if I have to guess where this is with 1 eye, I can't do it. Okay? So for really close, you need to have 2 eyes. But for farther than a bumper on a car, you can guess with 1 eye. So Amnon said what we do in our brains, we can do in our computers. The engineers at Toyota said, we don't believe you. Here's $100,000, prove it. So Amnon took the money, he came back to Jerusalem, he got a couple of PhD students, a couple of engineers, they got a box load of computers, put them in the back of a van, hooked them up to a camera looking out the front windshield, and he proved it. You can detect 3D objects in 3D space with a single camera. That's huge. No one ever thought it could be done. Now Amnon proved it. It's not just about paying half price for cameras. The amount of computing power that you need to integrate 2 streams of video is like 10 times as much as you do to deal with 1. And there's many, many other advantages. But in any case, Amnon proved it, but he proved it academically, theoretically. His system worked at like 9 frames a second. That's not fast enough to do anything in real time. By the time that system says brakes, you just ran over 10 people. So that's when he hired my friend, and he hired myself and a couple of other engineers. He stuck us in this attic in a house in Ramot, and we took all the algorithms, and we took all the software, and we took all the hardware, and we put it in this chip that works at the speed of your eye, 30 frames a second. So now you can do something with this. But the question is what? What do you do with a super duper image processor that detects 3D objects in 3D space with a single camera at the speed of your eye? So you guys know the end of the story, autonomous vehicles. But in the year 2000, 2001, 2002, nobody was talking about autonomous vehicles. When I was interviewed by the CEO and he was hiring me, he said, listen, we're making ACC, Adaptive Cruise Control. You guys know cruise control. You push the button, you go 90 kilometers, whatever it is. There's a car in front of you. You put on the brakes, the car moves away. You set up the system again. Adaptive Cruise Control says, we see the car in front of you. We will slow you down and keep your distance. When the car moves away, we will automatically put you back to the speed you wanted. You don't touch anything. Okay? Adaptive Cruise Control, ACC, was available in the year 2000 based on radar. Radar is very expensive. It costs a few $1,000s, so it was only available in really high-end cars like the Jaguar that we had in our garage that we were mimicking. So Mobileye came and said, you know what? We don't need radar. We can use a cheap camera and our cheap chip. We'll sell the whole system for $100. ACC for the masses. We'll be in every car. So that's what Mobileye was founded to do. He cut my salary. He gave me my options, and he said, don't worry, we'll have an exit in 2 years. Now, either he was naive, or I was naive, or the both of us were. But look, it takes about a year to design the logic of this chip. It takes a year to test it. It takes a year to put it into silicon, a year to test the silicon, a year to test the car. You're looking at 5 to 6 years before you're putting on the brakes of a commercial vehicle. But we didn't know that, so off to work we went. 1 year became 2, 2 years became 3, 3 years became 4, and then the CEO came to us and said, we're out of money. We need to sell this chip today. We can't wait to be in cars. We need to find some other application. What can we do? How can we sell this? We need to make some money or we're closing. So everybody brainstorm, what can we do? What kind of application? How can we sell this now? In the end, we came up with this thing called the aftermarket product. The aftermarket product is basically this box that has a camera looking out your front windshield. It has my chip inside the box. It analyzes what's going on. It sends the signals over a cable to a display on your dashboard. And basically, it tells you, here, 2.5 seconds till you crash into the car in front of you. If that guy slams on his brake, that's how much time you have to react. And then if you get too close, it beeps you. If you leave your lane without signaling, it beeps you. It's a warning system. Mobileye did not invest in this system at all. We're not interested in this. We just want to make some money so we can be in cars, right? We hired sales guys on commission. We didn't advertise, no marketing, no sales, nothing. But there were people who were very interested in this system. Insurance companies want to know if they can save on all the accidents people get into. Safety companies want to know if they can reduce accidents in the country. So they started analyzing how people were driving with our system. And I'll never forget the night when they told us the results of these systems. So this is Ziv Aviram, the CEO who took the company public. And this is one of the parties that we had. You know how companies work? They want to make you feel like a family. So they have a big party once a year. They give you some nice food. They give you some nice entertainment. And then the CEO gets up and he gives his CEO speech. You know how the CEO speech goes? I will tell you. It's really very simple. We're doing well. Work harder. We'll do better. It usually takes CEOs about 20 to 30 minutes to say these 3 sentences. Now, this particular year, the CEO didn't have his CEO face on, and he didn't have his CEO speech on. He was very serious. He looked out at everyone, and he said, you know what, guys? We're saving lives. And everybody looked at each other and said, what? What saving lives are you talking about? We're making ACC for the masses, a luxury toy. So it turns out that all these companies that we're doing analysis on is we're finding out that anybody who's driving with our system is not getting into an accident. And if they did get into an accident, it turned what would have been a fatal crash into a fender bender because the people were warned before anything ever happened. And so all of a sudden, Mobileye did a pivot. We changed directions. We became a safety company. We changed our motto, our vision, your safety. And then we realized that, there's a whole plethora of applications that together are called ADAS, Advanced Driving Assistance Systems. Advanced Driving Assistance Systems basically means any kind of computer control that helps the car drive better. So we said, if we're beeping people because they get too close, we can put on the brakes. We'll call it AEB, Automatic Emergency Braking. And if we're beeping people because they leave their lane, we can keep them in their lane, and we'll call it LKA, lane keeping assist. And basically, like I said, a huge amount of applications were developed where countries are giving safety points for any car that has any one of these ADAS features. And insurance companies are giving discounts for any car that has any one of these features. And there's only one company in the entire world that has all the ADAS features in one chip. And that's why Mobileye today owns like 90% of the ADAS market. And that brings us to the next pivot. So a couple of the engineers were working on the system, and they said, you know, we're controlling the brakes, we're controlling the gas, we're controlling the steering, we're controlling the car. Let's make an autonomous vehicle. So they went to the 6th floor, they told the CEO their story. I can tell you if this was in LA or this was anywhere else, the CEO would have looked at them and said, we have no customers for autonomous vehicles. Go back to work. But this isn't any other country. This is the startup nation. And so we do things a little bit differently. And so the CEO said, you know, that's an interesting research project. Take this Audi and go play in the garage. So these two engineers got another couple of helpers, and they got 3 of these chips, hooked them up to 8 cameras surrounding the car, and within 1 year, they had the world's first camera-only autonomous vehicle. You can read about it. It was in the New York Times. It drove from Jerusalem to the Dead Sea, hands-free. Now, what the huge thing was is that I'm telling you this is a camera only because the fact of the matter is, you guys know Google and many other companies have been working on autonomous vehicles long before us, but they are working on the paradigm of a LiDAR sensor. LiDAR is a spinning laser system. That's that thing that sits on the top of the car. That system alone costs $100,000. People today, of course, are working on making it much cheaper, and it will become, but at the time, just the sensor cost $100,000. We were able to get this car to drive hands-free for $2,000. That's huge. That's a game changer. That's commercially available today. So we now had this platform, but we still had no customers for autonomous vehicles. But we did have ADAS customers. And so Tesla came and they said, what's that? We want it. And Audi and Nissan and VW and just about every car company that you can think of came and said, we want that system. Every company except Toyota. So if you remember, Toyota gave us the first money, but then they said, oh, you proved it. We're Japanese. We work with the Japanese. We're going to go to NEC. NEC is like the Intel of Japan. And you know, you can't blame them. Look, everybody works with their family. They work with their country. And really, it makes sense that you would do that, except not in business, really. You see, because in business, it doesn't make sense to pay your brother so much money to do certain things that he doesn't really know how to do when the guy down the street has been doing it for 10 years and is still selling it for half the price, right? Like, you do business with the guy down the street and you give your brother some money to help him out till he finds something good to do. In any case, I remember when they told us that Toyota plugged in the NEC chip. It burned up the minute they took it off the driveway. So what happened? NEC, they're smart guys. They make tons of chips. They know how to make chips. Thing is that they don't know how to make this chip. Because we've been working on this system for years, and we learned a lot of things. I'll try to give you a little lesson in computer engineering, very simple. So this is what's known as the von Neumann architecture of computers. Von Neumann was a great genius who came up with this architecture. Basically, this is like all computers are built inside. There's a control unit. This is like the thing that plays your movies. There's a math unit. This is the thing that does the scrambling and descrambling, or the compressing, decompressing. There's memory. This is where your movie's sitting. There's an output, which is, you know, your screen. There's an input where the disk and the movies are stored. That's a computer, okay? Now, most chips look like this, but not this chip. So I'll try to explain to you with one of the blocks that I was responsible for is called the tracker. Okay, the tracker is responsible for following cars frame by frame, image by image. So like if I'm driving on this road and I'm following this Ferrari, I need to make sure that when the video stream comes in, this image and this image are the same and I'm following the car. Okay? So now with your eyes you can see picture by picture, you can see the car, but how do you do that in a computer? Okay? There's no pictures in computers. Actually there are what are called pixelated pictures, right? Pictures that are made of dots of color. But dots of color are very computation intensive. It's very hard. It takes a lot of computing power. So basically we use black and white. Okay? But the fact is there's not really even black and white inside a computer. There are numbers. Okay? So like a pixel, let's say that we're using 8 bits. You have 256 numbers. So white is 0 and black is 255. And all the grays in between are the numbers from 1 to 254. So you can represent a Ferrari in black and white with numbers. So now we basically reduced this problem of following 2 images or 3, whatever, image by image, to a math problem. What we do is, all we need to do to compare 2 images is take this pixel from picture number 1 and this pixel from picture number 2, and we subtract them. If they're the same, we get 0. So now we go through all the pixels in the image, and we subtract each one. And we add them all up. At the end, we get one number. If the number we get is 0, so the pictures are identical. If we get 10, so we're probably okay. If we got a big number, so we lost the car. Okay? So that's like one piece of trying to follow a car. Okay, now, how do you do that in a general processor? So let's say that I'm the control unit. So I say, picture number 1, give me pixel number 1. Picture number 2, give me pixel number 1. Mr. Math Unit, subtract. Thank you very much. Pixel 2, subtract, add, 3, add 5. If you start doing this for thousands of pixels, 30 frames a second, you're going to start sweating. If you're a chip, you're going to burn up. So we didn't design our chip like this. I know that I need to compare 2 images. I don't need to make a general processor. Okay? So I designed a very specific processor that says, give me a row of pixels from here, and give me a row of pixels from here, and here's a row of subtractors and an accumulator, and while I just did that math, I already got the other rows. They're sitting waiting for me. And so this chip is working in pipeline, parallel fashion, super efficient, so that this chip can work on your windshield, in the desert, in the summertime, without a fan, and still not burn up. And so that's why in 2008 we got the award for the best electronic design in the automotive industry, and that's probably one of the reasons why Intel came to us. So that brings us to the Intel story. In 2014, the CEOs of Intel, BMW, and Mobileye got together to make a consortium. And basically, they made this partnership where they said, we are going to bring an autonomous vehicle commercially available. And so this was a huge boon for Mobileye. We had now signed a contract with the big boys. The thing is that Intel was not so happy, because Intel said, who are our partners here? Well, there's BMW. What do? They do the metal and the rubber. We can't do that. And who are these guys? Mobileye? What do? They make a chip? We make chips. As a matter of fact, the whole board controlling the car is Intel. All the chips on the board, Intel. There's only one chip in the entire system that's not Intel. What do you think they want to do to us? They want to get rid of us. For days, for weeks, for months, they came here and they said, how does this interface work? And how does that work? And how do you do this? And they basically try to figure out what we're doing so that they can do it and get rid of us. They have no need for us. But then something amazing happened, and the CEO of Intel came to Israel, and he gathered all the Mobileye employees together, and he announced the exit. And he said, you know, we've been watching you for months, and we decided that it was better to buy you than to beat you. But that's not the whole story. You see, what happened when Intel bought Mobileye is what I call a paradigm shift, a complete change in the way the world looks at Israel, a change in the way the world looks at the Jews. You see, when the CEO of Intel and the CEOs of Mobileye and the Prime Minister of Israel got up to announce this buyout on international news in a press conference, the CEO of Intel got up and he said, you know, Intel is just as much an Israeli company as it is an American company. But why would you say that? First of all, it's not true. Intel is an American company with a lot of operations in Israel. But even if it was true, why would you say that? Do you know that Mobileye is not an Israeli company? Bad for business. People don't like to do business with the Jews. People don't like to do business with Israel. We were incorporated in the Netherlands. We have an answering machine in the Netherlands, and we have an R&D facility in Jerusalem. But all of a sudden, it is good to do business with Israel. All of a sudden, the CEO of the largest chip manufacturer in the world says, I'm Israeli. And so if that's not enough to convince you, so the CEO of Israel's largest, most active venture capital fund, our crowd, his name is John Medved, he went on record as saying that since the Mobileye Intel buyout, my phone has not stopped ringing from all over the world, and they're all saying the same thing. We want a piece of this. Take our money. And so basically what I'm trying to say is that everything has changed. People have realized that we are about fixing the world. We are trying to make the world a better place for everybody. And we're spearheading that effort with science and technology. That is how we are the startup nation. That is our purpose. That is our power. Okay? We want to make the world a better place, whether it's in science, in medicine, in industry, in technology. All of these things, we are leaders because that's our purpose. And so I've been giving this talk now ever since the Intel Mobileye buyout, not because I chose to, but because groups from all over the world are coming. And so I'm trying to explain to them that this is our purpose. And I also try to explain to them that we're also the people of the book. And the people of the book, that's a book about morality. It's a book about harmony. It's a book about teaching people ethics, how to live together in harmony. And so I also am giving a course at a couple of universities on ethics in AI, because as wonderful as I believe technology is, you can do a lot of damage if you don't do it right. So anyway, like I said, I've been giving this talk now for several years, trying to basically explain to people why we are here and what we are doing. I've given it to MBA programs from just about every university you can imagine, from Hong Kong to London to the United States to Colombia, Chile. I've given it to VC groups. I've given it to United States congressmen, to United Nations delegates. About a couple of years ago, there was a VC group from China, really rich guys. They're the people who built the Shanghai Towers. Looked it up. They're like one of the tallest towers in the world. They came to Israel on a 2-week fact-finding mission. What is the secret of the Jews? What are these people doing? We want to know. So the CEO and his top 20 executives came to Israel, and they went from company to company to try to figure out, what are we doing here? And then they got to me, and I told them exactly the same story I told you. But they don't want to hear about cheeseburgers, rabbis, surfing. They want to know, what makes a Mobileye? How did you do it? So I said, look, you want to know what makes a Mobileye? The CEO at his last company dinner, he said, everybody's asking me this question, and I'll tell you. He said, a lot of stars need to line up. You need to have a novel idea, something that people didn't think could be done, detecting 3D objects with a single camera. You need to be able to roll with the financial punches. You have money, you don't have money. That story I told you that we were out of money, that's like one of 10 stories where Mobileye could have just shut down, bankrupt, out of business. But we figured out how to keep going. You need to have stamina. You have to keep working. You're not going to have an exit in 2 years or 5 years or 10 years. Mobileye went public on the New York Stock Exchange after 14 years and were bought out by Intel after 17 years. You need to be able to pivot, change directions. You're making ACC, you're making ADAS, you're making autonomous vehicles. And finally, the CEO said, I like to quote Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson said, I believe in luck. And I believe the harder you work, the more luck you have. So I turned to these Chinese investors and I said, look, I'm a rabbi, so I like to modify that a little bit. I believe that there is a creator. I believe he wants us to fix the world. I believe that if we do his will, so he will help us do his will. So if we work harder, we'll have more help from heaven. So right when I said that, so the tour guide that was bringing around this Chinese investor group, he came running up to me and he said, drop the God stuff. They're total atheists. So what do you say to that? So I looked out at them. I said, I heard you're atheist. So they smiled and they nodded their heads. I said, so let me leave you with an enigma, a riddle, a kind of a hard question that doesn't have such an easy answer. It's called the Jewish people. So the Jewish people have been living in this land, and the Romans came and they kicked us out. And they spread us out all over the globe. And wherever we went, they didn't like us very much. As a matter of fact, wherever we went, they tried to kill us. But we survived. Not only did we survive, we came back to our land, we rebuilt our country, and we are so successful that there are groups from all over the world coming to find out what's our secret. How do you explain that? You realize non-Jews have written about us. Mark Twain famously said, everything is mortal but the Jew. What is the secret of his immortality? Nicholas Berdy, of a famous Russian historian, said, I've studied the histories of all the peoples, and they all follow the same pattern, except the Jews. So I looked at these Chinese investors and I said, how do you explain that? Some people call it luck. I call it the help of heaven. Thank you very much.